everybody. I would like to welcome you in the name of Open Knowledge Conference today, this afternoon at this pre-conference session. My name is Matthias Stürmer. I'm from University of Bern and moderating this interesting discussion. It's a pleasure to kind of welcome you to this one of the first sessions of the Open Knowledge Conference. You have made a good choice out of 8 different tracks, and I hope we won't disappoint you for this interesting session on challenges of open data. Please let me now give over the word to our distinguished panelists. Here I have Anahi Ayala from Italy or Africa or United States. She will tell you more about her background and the future. And we have Luigi Reggi from Italy, from Italy. We have Irina Tisacova from Moldova, so I'm sorry. And we have Marcus Dapp from Germany or UK, or we are international conference, so you will have also very international speakers today. Now, just for the schedule of this 1-hour session, we will start with an introduction of each panelist, telling the story basically of the person, of the organization he or she has been involved with, and also giving a little bit insight on the challenges they have encountered in their various projects on open data. Afterwards, we have open discussion, question sessions. You are required to participate, so open knowledge, open data is also about participation, so please be prepared to ask some questions. And then we hopefully pull out the interesting stories out of these interesting persons. And last but not least, we'll have a conclusion session where we make another roundup of what are the learnings, basically, what have been the insights of the sessions, how can we transfer the experience from one particular project to the generic view, and how can you learn also from these successful or sometimes not so successful open data projects. If anything is unclear, please don't hesitate to interrupt, ask a question directly also during the introduction session. And otherwise, I would like to hand over the word to Anahi, and please introduce yourself and also your background.
Okay, hello everybody. My name is Anahi Ayala Iacucci, and I work for an international organization called Internews. It is a media development organization. We work in around 50 countries around the world, and we have around 68, 70 projects. Our main focus is local media, and the reason why our main focus is local media is because the mission of the organization and the belief of the organization is that once you have independent and impartial media within a specific country, you're actually empowering local communities to make decisions by themselves. And in the past 3 years, I would say, Internews has created the unit where I work, which is the Center for Innovation and Learning. And the creation of the center came after the understanding that talking about local media today means basically talking about everybody that has a mobile phone with internet connection. Because everybody today can create, gather, publish, and collect information in a numerous type of platforms. And so the idea is that we as an organization are trying to work not just with local media, but with everybody within a specific country that is actually creating and spreading information. And so we're focusing much more on information systems. Now, where does open data come in when I'm talking about the work that Internews does? Well, we have been, one of our oldest projects within the organization is a project that we have in Kenya that has been always focusing on working on health-specific issues or democracy. And Kenya was also one of the first countries where the World Bank, in collaboration with the government, created the Kenya Open Data Initiative. The idea was to open the data of the Kenyan government and make it available to everybody to use. One of the things that was very interesting for us is that working with media, data is always a big thing. Because as a journalist, if you're building stories, if you're doing a research, if you're doing investigative journalism, before at least 50–60% of your time was spent going around offices and municipalities and people trying to collect that data that will allow you to build your story and to understand an issue. And so we were very interested in the Open Data Initiative in Kenya, and once we went to look at that data, we discovered that there's a big difference in between open data and public data. A lot of that project, especially at the beginning, was public data. It was not open, in the sense that it was public, everybody could see it, but it was not open in the sense that not everybody could understand it, use it, replicate it. Not everybody had the tools and the means to actually take this data and use it for something. And so when we started working with journalists, one of the first challenges that we had is that a lot of we decided to do a workshop on open data and data journalism. And we had a trainer coming in, and we started working with journalists. And then the first ever meeting we had with them talking about the Open Data Initiative, we realized that a lot of those journalists have never used an Excel spreadsheet. And so talking about open data and huge amount of data set and analysis and visualization and graphs was really not a good starting point. We had to start from how do you read a table? How do you put a table, within a certain context? And then from there go to, why would I write an article or a story about data? And so the understanding that data is relevant to people only when it's linked to a story. I read something that I'm interested in because I think it's relevant to me. And so having the data public doesn't make it relevant. To make it relevant, you need to link it to the daily life of people. And we also need to do it in a way that they understand. And so we went into looking at data visualization, and then we realized that data visualization and how you visualize information is strictly linked to culture. Not all countries sees the same things in front of the same image. And so looking at how we're now doing a project, for example, on data visualization in China, and seeing how Chinese people look at data visualization, now we do it in the US or how people do it in Kenya is very different. And so in a way, it's kind of like the cultural perspective of what open data is. One of the other things that we noticed in working, specifically in Kenya and then opening a lot of other open data projects around the world, is what we call data literacy, which is what I was talking about before, is the idea that you can have the data public, but if people don't understand it, then it doesn't matter. Not only that, we are talking a lot about data access, but the truth is that the majority of the open data project in developing countries are still entirely based on internet tools. And not everybody has internet in a lot of those countries. Even looking at a lot of Asian countries, for example, that are now starting talking about open data again, the means to access that data, it's still the internet. And still not everybody has access to the internet. And so we can do all the hackathons that we want, we can create all the amazing mobile applications that we want, but still it's gonna be very hard for people to get that data and use it. And so my last point is, how is this data being used? Because again, opening data doesn't mean that that data is actually useful. If we are advocating for open data and if we're asking governments and organizations to open the data, how are we envisioning people to use it? And are we monitoring how people are using it? Because for example, one of the things that came out from Kenya was that after a year of the platform being open and amazing visualizations and tons of data, nobody was using it. And they had to go back and try to ask themselves the question, why nobody's using it? And so the usability of the data, in a way, it's also linked to the fact that we need to start monitoring now and understanding now for opening data, how can people use it? Because if we understand the way people can use it, then we can understand the way we want to actually open that data, we can understand what kind of tools we can actually use to actually spread that data. And again, we can go back to finding the story behind the data and making the data relevant. Was it good? 5 minutes?
Very good, yes. I think you raised already a couple of very interesting questions, and I noted them down. I suggest that we move on, getting to know Luigi.
Hi everybody, my name is Luigi. I'm from Rome, Italy. I'm working at the Ministry of Economic Development, in particular as the Direction General for European Regional Policy. So the policy that manages the structural funds from Brussels that came to the lagging regions of Europe, in particular southern Italy. And my job at the ministry is to try to make sure that the money flows in the right direction, and this is a very hard job, I have to say, and because Italy have a tradition of kind of sometimes misuse of funding, and it's very difficult to find the best way to tackle this problem. It's a problem of policy efficiency, and in Italy it's it's kind of core business of Italian government, because 25% of total investment in Italy are from EU structural funds or related cohesion policies in Italy. So we can say that make sure that those policies are transparent and efficient is very important, and the open data here can play a major role. I can talk a little about a project that we launched last year. The name is Open Coesione, Open Cohesion, which is a web open data portal that is basically open up all the data about projects and recipients of structural funds in Italy. So you can find there aggregated data, data visualization, and the detail for over 600,000 projects, from little projects, for example, grants to individuals, research projects, or infrastructural projects. So you have a huge range of categories and kind of projects.
What is the volume of this the entire project, the monetary volume, you know?
It's 60 billion euros.
Okay.
The total amount of monitored resources. We have the programmed resources for this period, of this programming period, 2007-2013. Those are the period of the EU budget. We have 100 billion euros spending.
So quite relevant number.
Quite relevant. And
your experience.
So the two main challenges I can split them into, as usually we do into two kinds of two sides, the demand side and the supply side, if you want, and the supply side as the way in which we as a government we release data, and the main challenge here I think is about institutional capacity. So the ability to deal with a very complex scenario in which you have many different organizations that manages the funds. We have in Italy 52 different managing authorities, and all of them have different systems that monitor the progress of each project. So when you release the data, you have to find a common fields and common schemas, and in order to publish them in one place. And another thing is about the giving people the policy context of the data, because if you just if you see each project, you kind of get lost in all the complexity and all this huge number of projects. And you have to give people the possibility to understand what are the policy issues that those projects are trying to solve. What are the policy options that the policymakers had when they designed the policy in the first place? This is a very important point. And the second challenge is about building kind of interpretative communities that could understand what the data is about, could use the data in an effective way, and could monitor the policy in a way that the policymakers and local administration feel the push from the bottom up and could be more effective and in doing the projects on time and finance the right projects that meets the needs of local communities. So we try to collaborate with local communities, local actors, associations, and the civic hackers, so-called communities and open data communities in Italy. We organizing the data journalism school and citizen monitoring courses, tools, and we launched a web-based and USAID-based platform to collect the feedback from the public and asking them to report about how the projects are progressing in time and to upload evidence and videos and so on.
So basically the audience, like the population, is monitoring these 60 billion euros being spent? Or?
Yeah, there is a platform that a bunch of citizen experts have launched this August, and the ministry is observing that from very close. I'm part of the group, so we are at a very early stage, so we can say that just a few hundred projects are now monitored. So it's a tiny fraction of all the total.
Yeah.
But I think we should understand better the method that we can apply to do that, and the lessons from other countries could be very useful.
What is the main lesson you have learned so far?
Well, the main lessons is to try to identify local needs by collaborating with local and associations that are connected to a particular field.
Yeah.
Because we finance, as I was saying before, a wide range of projects, and for each project there are very different issues and needs at the local level. So, for example, in Palermo, we have managed to contact a local association that is monitoring the state of local transportation, and so they are helping us in trying to figure out the best way to ask the citizen about how well this infrastructure responds to local needs, or the case of all the apartments and buildings and villas that belongs to the organized crime, that when a local boss is arrested, they pass to the property of the state. So we have to manage all this kind of building and asking people how to do that, and it is a way to use those buildings, those fields, to do projects that is financed as well with EU cohesion policy.
Okay. Very interesting. I think we'll go back to some of the examples you mentioned.
Yeah.
And now next I would like to ask Irina, what did you learn in Moldova, or first of all, what do you do in Moldova?
Well, just as an introduction, I will structure my presentation in the following way. I'll talk about the major challenges that we encountered and how we responded to the challenges. So my name is Irina Tisacova. I'm the Open Government Coordinator at the Government of Moldova, working in the e-governance center that is responsible for the governance e-transformation agenda. And the open government and open data initiatives are part of this e-transformation agenda. The entire project was made possible through the help of the World Bank. So we've benefited a lot from the experience and resources of the World Bank in working in similar initiatives all around the world. So we launched the initiative in April 2011 with the launch of the Open Data Portal. So the idea behind this was that, okay, the government has a lot of data, now let's put it all online on the platform. That's most of the governments do this, basically. But this is when you encounter most of the problems. And I came to a conclusion that on the technical point of view, the challenges in opening government data, the major challenges that you encounter, they reveal the issues and the problems that the government has in collecting, archiving, and transmitting data between agencies. And also the issue of formats, of standards, of classifiers, so the internal infrastructure that the government has for data. So in order to make data public for citizens to consume it, we had to figure out which data to publish, in which formats to publish it, how regularly we should update the data, and that became a major issue when we realized that not all the data in the government is structured, and we could not release it immediately. So the quality of data was one of the biggest issues. So what we're trying to do, and many institutions, they fear that, okay, my data is not accurate, what can I do now? Like, citizens will judge it. And my main argument is, okay, but even though the data might not be accurate, the governments base their decisions on the data that they have, and citizens have to have access to this data. So right now we have a lot of manual data that is uploaded on the portal, but since many institutions have databases and information systems, the new portal, data portal that we're currently developing, and hopefully we will launch it by the end of the year, that's using the CCAN platform, it will have the opportunity for uploading the data through APIs. This will hopefully increase the demand and use of the data that the government publishes. Another interesting challenge that we faced is that this Open Government Data Initiative in Moldova was not driven by the demand of data from the civil society, which happened in most of the countries, but it was actually driven by the supply. The government committed to this initiative, and the government started releasing data, and then we had this issue, okay, but who's using this data? Who's actually building applications or using data in universities in research or in anything? So we had to monitor and increase the use of data. And by not having this pressure from the demand side, it was difficult to convince the institutions that were not publishing data, because they said, well, why should I publish it if nobody's using this data? What's the point? So we had to work simultaneously in the government on both government supply side as well as citizens' demand side of data. And for that we had various events. We had Open Innovation Week, we had hackathons, we had data journalism bootcamp, and we're planning even more, and we're also planning to collaborate with universities to increase the awareness around this initiative, as well as the use and building applications and actually using the real value of this data. So basically still facing major challenges, and especially I would like to touch on the legal issues. We had the law on access to information, but we didn't have a law on public sector information reuse. So even though we launched the initiatives, we did not have the necessary legal background to obligate the ministries to first publish data and second publish it in certain formats, open formats with the reusable open data license. So right now, what we have recently did as part of the Open Government Action Plan, the Parliament approved a law on public sector information reuse in accordance to the EU PSI directive. So we are covering the legal background. We are working on the technical aspects of the open data, and we're collaborating even more with civil society so that data is used and so that we build enough capacity outside the government for civil society to do something with the data, as well as we train civil servants to be able to work not just with huge databases, but as simple as Excel worksheets. So that was, I tried to offer you a brief overview of the major challenges that we have, but there are definitely more than these two. And we're working hard to advance the Open Data Initiative.
Okay, thanks. Irina, can you give us an example, just a practical example on what kind of data did you publish and wasn't used, basically, and then you did something and then it was used? Is there some very simple example?
Another challenge that I'll deduct from your question is how can the government know how the data is used, except just knowing the amount of downloads per data set for every data set. We don't have this mechanism of citizens reporting back. They can write to us, but we don't have this form where citizens say, well, I need the data, I'm requesting the data for this and this and that reason. This is the only way for us to keep track of that. But there is a lot of very valuable data being released, such as I would say Boost. It is the Ministry of Finance data on all the public expenditures. It was a very, very comprehensive data set. And people use it, people in the finance. We have a project with the civil society that's making visualizations based on this data. And there are some other examples of data, but as I said, the major challenge remains on knowing how the data is used. Yeah. But another, I would say, success is we're trying to implement the GIS into the Open Data portal. And while collaborating with the civil society and private sector partners on making this possible, we actually found out that there are students that actually use the geolocation, geospatial data to build applications, and they actually won some prizes at international hackathons and all that. But it's the word of mouth, you know. We don't have this documented officially. What are the specific examples and how people use it.
Okay, so it's basically one of the identified challenges on flying blind as a government, not knowing what is being used. Okay, thanks. Marcus, what's up in Open Knowledge Foundation? What is your experience from Munich? Tell us about your background.
So good afternoon everyone. My name is Marcus Dapp. I'm working for the Open Knowledge Foundation in the UK as a consultant, and our team is mainly involved in doing open data portals for governments across the world and other public institutions. For that input statement, I think I prepared 2 or 3 examples, or let's say an anecdote, a general observation, and an idea we are just trying out in the OKF Germany, where I'm also part of the board. So the anecdote, before I joined the OKF 1.5 to 2 years ago, I was working as an IT strategist for the city of Munich. So I was inside city government, and because of my background of similar topics with open source and open data, I was trying to bring in that idea, and because as a strategist you should bring new ideas to an organization. I was trying to convince people that open government and consequently open data is the way to go, and we should try out something. So we did a pilot project, which went quite nicely. So the pilot project was 2 parts. The first was a citizen participation project where we simply asked the citizens, what are your ideas, wishes, expectations for your digital city, the digital Munich in the future? What should happen in the next 5 years, let's say. So we collected a lot of interesting ideas around e-government, of course, but also around participation and open government. In the middle of the whole project, we had a workshop, a small conference, 2-day open space-like conference where we invited citizens and people from the administration discussing these ideas further, and sort of in an official act hand over this idea list from the citizens to the city. At that workshop we also published a few data sets, and think about it, was 3 years ago basically. It's not like everybody did it yet. So it was quite new, so we decided to publish a few data sets and started a competition, an app contest for another 2 months. So that was all very small, just a few data sets, just a few applications, a few hundred people participated in the whole process of idea input and collection, and of course much less people participated while programming apps. But it was not easy to convince the people inside the administration to actually do this. And I remember one of the, so I had several presentations in the IT Commission, and the lady who was running the department, like directly under the mayor basically, at one point I was talking about this and saying, well, it will be great and we will publish data and it will be useful, etc. And she said, that sounds interesting, but why are we doing this? Who is going to use this data? For what purposes? And my answer was, that's exactly the idea why we should do it, because we don't know. And she was kind of surprised about this answer, because she expected me to say, well, this and this and this is going to happen. The fact is, you don't know what is going to happen when you open data. As an administration, you have no idea. Of course, you can try to steer it a bit by choosing the data sets. And of course, financial data is always very interesting. But at the end, you do not really know what happens. And that usually frightens people in the administration, because they are used to control everything. And that's not meant in a negative way. It's just how the administration works traditionally. They check and cross-check everything before they publish it. And therefore, it's quite a challenge for them actually to publish their data, to make it public. And an unknown number of people from unknown origin will have access to that data and be able to talk about it in the public. So it's a loss of control. And I think the challenge in the beginning is really to overcome this initial reaction of danger. We should not do this. Because if you don't overcome this initial resistance, you're not getting anywhere. And it's difficult because you also cannot convince, I mean, of course, the nice examples, as we have heard here, and there are other examples, are increasing. The number of examples is increasing, but it's still difficult, because it's easy to say, yeah, it worked in Italy or in Moldova, but probably it doesn't work in my country or this city. So that was the anecdote. The general observation, which also was touched upon in I think all of your other input statements, is this kind of disconnect between, and it's related to what I just said, this disconnect between the administration and this community. The administration, well, when they have reached the point of, okay, we want to do open data, let's put up a program to do that, because internally quite a lot of work has to be done until just a simple website with a few data sets can be announced and launched. And of course, the administration has their own agenda and their own reasons and ideas and motivations why they publish or why they do open data. And it's not always only these motivations the community likes to hear. We want to become more transparent. Maybe it's also just a nice project for one politician to be ahead of another one. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. It's just the community outside has to take these differences in motivation into account when asking for that. So the disconnect is, on one side you have the people who run the portal, and they think about, okay, which data sets could be published, and of course their argumentation is different. They go for the easy data sets first, fast to publish, so you can show a success, and let's see what happens in 12 months, then I'm not in charge anymore, or whatever. So it's a different thing. And on the other side you have the community. It's this unhierarchical, non-structured network of people of various interests who have various needs for data. And it's hard to grasp, even for the OKF, who considers itself as a quite community-embedded organization in various countries. It's not that you can, I mean, you can easily make a list of all the open data portals in Europe, but you cannot make a list of all the people reusing it, and you will never be able to. So it's always this unknown thing. And so what we're trying to do here is, and that's the third aspect, a nice example, I think, and I hope it will going to work out in Germany as well. In the US, an organization started a few years ago that is called Code for America. I don't know who of you have heard about Code for America? Okay, very nice. So with OKF Germany, we are trying to bring this to Germany. So for those of you who don't know, Code for America, or Code for All.de, as we call our program, is, well, you do sort of a cultural injection to a city government. That means you select fellows, a small team, 3 fellows on the average, for a city, and these 3 fellows will be working inside the city government with the people in the government, in the administration, city administration, for 9 months to actually do open government and open data related projects. So there are many various interesting aspects of this. One is, how does a city go about it? Usually administrations are specifying the problems, putting them in quite large documents, publish them for tender, so official procurement processes, and outside people read this complex document, try to write an equally complex document that is describing a solution, and they compete in the procurement process. Here we are saying it doesn't make too much sense to have this approach, because to actually use the innovation capacity and the ideas of these young people, including the community they partly bring with them, it would be suboptimal, let's say, to predefine everything and just have a project say, we want to have a new website with data, and these 3 people just should do it, and you just have a normal IT project. But that again is difficult for the administration, because they kind of don't know what they will get at the end, but still they have to make an investment in the beginning in these people, in the process. But what we hope to get out of it is not only results in the sense of apps or data published or hackathons and related community events taking place, but to start, and I think that's the underlying fundamental challenge we have, provoke this change in the culture. Because administrations, tradition over the last hundreds of years, have developed, and they have a certain culture, and it's not so different from country to country, I think. And today, some elements of this culture support open data. I mean, many people, individuals in the administration say, and of course, I'm a public servant, I'm all in favor for being public, but not all of them. And usually it's related to hierarchy inside as well. So the people higher in the hierarchy may have more to lose if some data sets are open. So this project, we hope, we are at the moment in the planning phase and trying to win over cities to participate and also get financed, of course, is to bring these 2 things, the administration, hierarchy, structure, and this community network beehive thing together to have real civic innovation at the end, and let's see how it's going.
Okay, so we'll see what kind of challenges you'll encounter there.
Yep.
Thanks a lot for your insight from the Open Knowledge Foundation also. I've written a lot of questions from my side, but as time goes up very quickly, I would like to open up the discussion, and you might have written down some of your questions, so please, who has any question, comment, also thought for food for thought for these panelists? Yes?
Yes, I have.
Can you also say your name and organization?
Yes, my name is Tisacova. I am city administrator at the city of Amsterdam. Working also with Opendata. We are taking part of the project Code for Europe.
Yeah.
You know about it. And I have been the last 12 years really open all the data we have, because in the Netherlands we have a law which is telling that you have to publish your data. It must be open. So all the data what we have our own data is open. From the side of the small enterprise and companies, they are not open. This is a problem which is not touched here, because you have sometimes open government, city government maybe, but other companies has a lot of data. They have made a lot of use of our data and also commercial benefit, but they don't open their own data. So I don't know if this is a discussion point in this Congress.
Okay, thank you. Maybe first, before you answer, just as a side note, we are recording this session. It is completely open. It will be transparent on the internet later on, so please be aware whatever you say. So, to whom may I ask? Have you any particular person you would like to answer this question or this request? Should companies also open their data?
I mean,
Yes.
yeah, I mean, from speaking for the Open Knowledge Foundation, of course, institutions are not only public institutions and administrations. There, the rationale is that the argument is made most easily. Tax-financed, citizen-financed administrations are supposed to publish the data they produce in the process of managing a city or a country. The case for corporations, and I would be interested to hear what you think, particularly because you mentioned startups or small companies particularly. I think there is value for a corporation in publishing data, for example, along their value chain or their supply chain. Nike started this already years ago, it's just nobody knows about it. Other corporations are doing similar, or trying out doing similar things, because more and more people from the user side, the ones buying t-shirts, ask where does the t-shirt come from, where does the material come from, how was it produced, how was the what was the process of putting the red color in the t-shirt, etc., etc. And how do you, I mean, as a company, of course you can write on your website, we are socially responsible and we take care of things, but who is going to believe you if you leave it with this statement? So let data speak and let data create trust. And the same why administration publishes finance data, to show we are actually managing the finances according to the citizens' wishes. A corporation can do the same to build trust. So I definitely see a case for corporations. But
where do you see the challenges for companies?
Well, there are many. For corporations, there are many. They can easily say, well, we cannot publish this information because the competition has an advantage, and if the competition does not publish their data, we also don't publish their data, our data. So there are additional challenges aside to the ones we already mentioned, which are, I think, still there if it's a corporation, and then there are additional ones.
Do you have any experience on
Well,
your company?
yeah, well, Internews is an NGO, so some of the data, for example, our budgets, and this part of our budget needs to be public because it's compulsory by the law in the US to actually publish the amount of money that we get from USAID or from other sources, and more or less how this money is divided. But to me, what is interesting is that we started a discussion almost 6-7 months ago about opening the data that we have. We have an outrageous amount of projects, and we have been working for 30 years around the world. So we have monitoring and evaluation data, we have data about, freedom of press, we have data about civil society, we have a lot of data that can be very useful to a lot of people. But the biggest issue that came out from this conversation, this is why this conversation is still going on within the organization, is, we are an NGO, we compete for money with other NGOs. So what is we know that there's an added value in opening our data, but if we do, are we losing an advantage towards a lot of other NGOs that do our same work? Are we giving up to them our knowledge, what we gain, in 30 years of work? And so I feel that it's very similar to what private companies do, but it's especially for big NGOs. I think it is, UN agencies is a different thing because they get money in different ways. But when we're talking about, non-governmental organizations that are asking for money to private donors, and there's not that, or to governments, and there's not that many of, that give money, then it goes into, how much is the advantage of opening my data versus, how much I risk to lose in actually giving up to, to competitors my knowledge.
So I think this is a very good point. We have found now during this discussion basically that giving up knowledge or data is also kind of decreasing your competitive advantage. Yes. So anyone to comment on the audience side? Have you given up?
It can also open up new chances.
Oh, absolutely.
So actually, if you open up after 30 years of experience, you have more experience than any other who are going to use it. So you will be always the first to benefit from it.
Oh no, I mean, I agree personally.
Yes, yes.
I can tell you that organization-wise, there's a lot of discussion, and that's exactly the discussion.
Yes.
People that are actually afraid about losing something versus other people within the organization that see the value and the advantage of actually, getting this data out. Also because of the use that other people can make, right? Sometimes we don't have the possibility to take the data that we have and analyze it and use it and create other value out of that data. And I know that there are a lot of people out there that could use this data in an amazing way and do a lot of different things. But I think that, I'll keep posted, I'll keep everybody posted, and maybe next year I will be here presenting an open data Internews platform.
Very good. So there was a question back there.
It's more of a statement. You were asking about sources. My name is Heather from OKF, brand new. So my statement is as follows. In the open source world, Tim O'Reilly wrote a report about open source in business and talked about why businesses need to use open source. And I think the mandate in the text that he wrote is directly applicable to what is the ask from our governments and our units to look at that, and how do we make ourselves more positioned to support it and support all the different mandates. So I would recommend looking at that report.
Okay, so basically learning from open source communities. I like this.
Our big brothers and sisters, I'll tweet it out. Go find it. I'll give myself some homework.
Perfect, thanks. Any other question or comment on the discussion so far? On challenges? Maybe any failed projects you have lived with?
I'm Iacucci from the Finnish Ministry of Justice. I develop open
From
government.
which, can you speak louder?
Yeah, I develop open government websites.
From which country?
Finland.
Finland.
Yeah. My question was, how do you handle the community if you want to crowdsource the development of governmental data? How do you handle the community, and how far can you go in incubating that?
Maybe Irina, have you any experience?
I'm afraid I didn't completely understand the question. How do you collaborate with the civil society, with the community on building a great portal, or what?
Or maybe enable them to do innovation as well?
Well, on the experience of Moldova, we launched the portal really, really fast. So there was no consultation around what the portal should look like. For this new version that we're developing right now, we basically posted an article, like a post. Hey, we're developing a new portal, and please write us what you don't like about this one, or give us some feedback, or what new features we should include. We did not receive that much feedback on the portal itself, but then we had to go and talk to the civil society that is directly involved in the open data, open government initiatives, and ask them individually. Because we have a group, the government is collaborating closely with the National Participation Council. It's a group of the leading NGOs in the country, and they have a work group on e-governance and open governance, and they also specialize in open data, and they provided us feedback, but it's a very limited amount of people that are really involved in this. So what we did had to go individually and talk to them. There's no big community so far.
Okay, so basically it's more informal contact, except for
Yes.
this national participation concept.
Yes. It's just meetings, it's just asking people who use data, and just what do you think and what would you suggest?
And who can participate in this national?
In the National Participation Council, there are 30 leading NGOs.
30 NGOs.
30 leading
Okay.
NGOs, yes.
And how often do you meet?
Regularly, a couple of times a month, but it depends. If there are some subjects we have to discuss, we can meet several times a week. But yes.
Okay,
There
so
is, it's informal for the open government and open data initiatives.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you.
Can I
In
add,
Italy, yes,
comment? Yeah,
please.
we're trying to participate to all local and national events of local communities, open data communities, and so on. And for example, we have a mailing list that's called Spaghetti Open Data. we discuss a lot about things, and yeah, many of us from the ministry are participating into the various debates or co-organizing things. And for example, for the Open Data Day, there are some cities in Italy that were organizing hackathons, and we proposed that one track of the hackathons was a monithon. So it's a civic monitoring marathon in which we bunch of policy wonks, as I say, are willing to pay a visit on the physical places where projects are taking place or developing, and so taking photographs and videos, and then reporting back to the base, and then building out a report, a case about all the things that I've seen, and then upload it on monithon.it. That it's this citizen monitoring platform that I was talking about.
So it's basically crowdsourcing, monitoring activity. So surveillance by the society.
Yeah, it's very funny. It's fun. It's fun doing that. It's playfully developed. So
maybe it's like Anahi 2.0, like. Okay, no, but no, so it's good. So, do you have any kind of findings that you've kind of encountered through this monitoring process? Like any project which went wrong or anything?
No, we're just launched this initiative, so
Okay.
it's
So
really Well, we have people in the administration that are finding out this right now, and they are willing to collaborate with us. And this is kind of an unexpected response from the hierarchies that you mentioned, because even at the top management of the administration, we received some very interested response, and we are developing projects to try to use this method of civic monitoring in a structured way, and as it is the standard from the administration, particularly from the Ministry of Education, which is in charge of research projects. We are doing something like that, but it's just all this is at a very early stage, so we will see next year.
Okay. Have you any experience from Finland? How Finland is connecting government with society and open data?
Well, what our project is doing, we use a Facebook group where the developers participate by posting stuff on the group, and kind of like create this kind of like meritocracy that they share it to each other, but in a room that's opened by us in Facebook. So, but that's pretty much the only thing that we found that actually works. So I was interested if someone has found something that would actually, be an effective way to manage the audience.
Yeah. Some sort of council. I think this sounds feasible. Any other ideas, comments? Yes? Oh, now it's almost over and the questions are popular.
Very short. I
Yes.
want to only ask if somebody started to speak together with Openstreetmap community for the geodata, and by opening the data obtained some results.
I have another funny anecdote from
Very quick anecdote.
very quick anecdote. Okay, so so we did this project in Munich a few years ago. It was all very nice, and afterwards we tried to spawn out a few concrete projects out of it. And one was the city of Munich offers already for a long time on their website a routing software for bicycles. So you can say, I'm here in the city, I want to go there in the city, which is the best route? By bike, not by car or public transportation. And it's old software. The data it's a bit strange because it's again made from an administrative point of view. So it just stops somewhere. Even if you want to go 5 kilometers further with a bicycle, it's not the city of Munich anymore. So the map just stops. So the idea was, of course, transform this, use Openstreetmap data, first publish all the data we have on our bicycle routes to Openstreetmap, and then use Openstreetmap. The result was the OpenStreetMap card was already better than what the city of Munich had, so there was not much to give to the community, but that was only found out after a few weeks of analysis. And so yeah, it's you have to be fast as an administration sometimes to really bring added value. I mean, there was of course added value in the data of the city of Munich, because some of the data, like the quality of the roads, is just something that OpenStreetMap per se is not really collecting. So, yeah.
But this is true for Germany. If you move in other places of Europe, the community is not so big.
Exactly.
And if you can help, you obtain from the OpenStreetMap community enrichment of the data and more participation. So this is important.
But the result of that was that now the people of the community and the administration work together on extending the map. So.
Okay, great, thanks. Any other? Also,
yeah, no, just briefly, we're actually working with OpenStreetMap in Indonesia, because Internews is starting the project on environmental data and environmental journalism, and OpenStreetMap has a pretty big project in Indonesia that they've started, I think, around a year ago. So they have a huge community. They've trained more than, I think, 300 mappers around Indonesia, and we're working with them on not just using the map layer for journalists to overlay the stories, but also the connection in between infrastructure and how infrastructure is planned, and different type of infrastructural issues and how they relate to environmental issues, both pollution and climate change related stuff. So we've just done, we've done a training 2 weeks ago, OpenStreetMap doing a training with journalists and talking about how the data they collect can be useful for journalists, and journalists understanding how the data that they actually have to collect or use for their stories is actually also relevant to the OpenStreetMap community.
Okay, thanks. Question here, yeah?
Yes, there are 3 kinds of documents I would like very much to discuss with you. So I work in the field of public transport.
What organization and name?
I am based in Brussels, and now I'm starting to develop projects with public transport users, okay, with a series of local members. And before, I used to work for 10 years in public transport companies. And in my experience, there are 3 kinds of information I would like to go in the stream of open data. One is the decisions made. For example, why this station is so big or so little. Whoever can track back why this decision has been made. I think this would be very, very interesting to make it public. And it's not the typical open data table. The second kind of data is the contracts between, for example, the maître d'œuvre and maître d'ouvrage, so the people that ask the work and the people that execute the work. And for example, if I take the case of public transport, like I know the case of Italy, we have regional railways and regions. And we don't know what are the precise agreements between the two to provide what kind of service, what kind of penalties if there are too many delays. So contracts. And the third kind is the situation of a project. So if I want to know today what is the status of an ongoing project, I don't know. So it's always closed and I cannot access. So I think this third kind of data should be pushed in the biggest flow of open data.
Okay. Any comment? Otherwise, I will move on. Yes.
Hi, my name is Reggi. I've worked from Solve IT, worked in e-government for over 10 years. And I'm just wondering, what is the value chain from government providing open data to the citizen? And are there programs for citizen oversight that you perceive that are important? And how do you justify spending government funds for specific projects that may be rather open for the private sector, like bicycle, getting the fastest route? So how do you justify the use of government funds and government open data programs as opposed to just open data for the sake of open data? So if you have any comments on that?
What do you mean citizen oversight?
Citizen oversight, for example, the Italian gentleman had this very good idea about all the government projects, where they stand, 60 billion, how they're used. And so citizen oversight would be, okay, these are government funds, so how can citizens now say, okay, those projects were great, or those projects were really bad, or we need a project in that area, So how do you see the value chain from governments providing information to the citizens, and then how the citizens can actively use that information to participate in something, to say something, to have oversight over something. So what is the something that you guys are looking at? Thanks.
Yes.
Yeah, that's a good question. We don't have a specific approach for publishing any of the projects and saying, okay, well, there was an attempt to publish all the information on all the e-governance acquisitions tenders and the status of the project. How much was spent, and is it delayed, was it made on time, and what are the outcomes? But that project hasn't been launched yet. And this would have put pressure on the government if it is not delivering on time, given that the amounts of the projects are pretty big. But what we have at a local level, at the capital city, country capital, sorry, it's not the city hall publishing all the decisions and citizens can provide feedback, but we have the reporting mechanism, which is implemented in several countries, where citizens can say, well, there is a problem in my neighborhood, and in a way it's citizen give feedback, but what's open is the department that's responsible for solving that problem, and you can see how efficient it is. So it's not directly related to how the public funds are spent, but it's related to how efficient public agencies are in managing these funds to solve social problems.
Okay.
Yeah, but that's a great suggestion for us to think about a platform on getting citizens' feedback on major decisions taken in.
Okay.
Yeah, no, one thing that I wanted to add is that it is a very tricky issue, the one that you're raising in one sense, and I use an example, the Huduma platform that was created in Kenya, also following the Kenya Open Data Initiative. And the idea was to provide very user-friendly platform, was a very highly customized Ushahidi platform. It was a map, you could go there, you could look for infrastructure or services in your area, either education or any type of service like water provision and so on. You could go there and look at that specific infrastructure, see how much money was spent, and then either add a comment to it or complain about it, or a kind of a mix in between fix my street if you want in a way, but also like a monitoring of the expenditure of the government. And while there was a lot of buzz around it, and the Kenyan government actually endorsed it when it was launched, I think that right now they have probably around 60 reports in it, and it was launched 2 years ago. So it wasn't really used almost at all. And that's my vision, my analysis of the reason why that happened is, one, if you are actually asking citizens to come and tell you or monitor what you're doing, there must be a trust that they already have in your capacity or in your willingness to actually listen. If they don't have that, they're not gonna waste their time. So asking people, tell me what you think about the money that I'm spending, so then I will do it. It works only if they really think that you will do it. And it also works for you only if you really have the capacity to then doing it. Otherwise, don't do it in the first place. And that's one thing. The second one is that the more we ask for citizen feedback, the more we need to have a very clear idea on what kind of feedback that we actually want. Because I'm again totally for, the government should do what I want the government to do because I vote, and that's one of the things that is part of, being in a democratic system. On the other side, it's also true that if you don't provide people with all the information they need to have to understand a certain issue, they may not really understand what the data is telling them. So again, it's the issue that you can public the data, put it out there for everybody to see, but then you have to provide people with the means to actually understand what this data means. If you want them to be part of the process that then leads to using, the money or the expenditure of the government in a different way. But I think that Uduma is a great example of how, it's not enough to put it out there and tell people you can say whatever you want and you can tell us or participate, because it's not that easy.
What's the internet penetration in Kenya?
Internet penetration in Kenya right now, I think it's around 60 or 70%. And I think that 90% of the people that access internet in Kenya does it through a mobile phone.
Yeah.
That's actually, I think it's around 95% of people that access it is through a mobile phone.
Is it difficult for them to access such information from mobile phones?
Well, it was also linked to SMS system, and yes, the mobile penetration in Kenya, I think it's around 98 or something like that. So I don't think that the problem was the access that people had to the platform. I think that the problem was a bigger problem of trust and relationship with the government managing data, and also again the idea that if I'm using my time and my money to actually use this system, then what's in for me?
Okay, so I think this was a very interesting, maybe also closing conclusion for this panel on challenges of open data. That basically putting out the data on the internet or somewhere doesn't just solve every problem in the world. And so maybe just for a very short final sentence from the other three remaining panelists, one question which remains, I think, from all of us: how do you actually can overcome this challenge of the second step, basically, of open data? Once the government has opened the data, what is your one single main recommendation for other governments, for communities, for NGOs? What should be done that the data being out there now, how that it's really being used and it's being useful? So maybe just as one, or let's start also with you, one little one little example which everybody can remember also.
Well, no. No, I mean, I think that I've already said that. To me is, again, making it irrelevant. For us, the most successful projects that we have done is when we actually have journalists and media creating stories. And when I talk about stories, I mean real stories, like the face behind the data.
Okay.
Is what engage people. If I see the face behind the data, the story behind the data, then I can recognize myself into that, and I can understand what's the relevance of that specific piece of data to my life.
Perfect. I think that's a good idea.
Yeah.
Luigi, from
relevance again, in the sense that you have to give, in particular, when dealing with spending data, you have to give context.
Context,
to the people.
okay.
Yeah. You because it's just not just that project that is doing good or not, or that specific policy, but you have to understand what are all the issues involved, and why a certain station was developed that big or that small. That's because there's a need. And the policy issues that you need to understand.
I think that's very good. So we have face, we have context. What's next?
Well, I don't think there's one recipe for it.
Just a keyword from your...
Yeah, I would just say answering the demand and knowing what the demand is.
Okay. Looking really at what people want and not just kind of what do you have from data. Okay.
And not just what, but also how often, formats, and listening closely to what is needed actually.
Okay. Marcus?
Two points. One is linking to what you just said. Involve the community early in the planning process already, because then you automatically incorporate the needs of the people you are doing this for. And the second one was, try new forms of engaging the communities. We all know, okay, you can have hackathons and all these kinds of workshops. If you do them around a certain data domain and try to attract people working in that domain, whether it be geodata or environmental. Don't do hackathons that just show all the data you have. It usually doesn't make much sense. And try new forms. For example, this Code for America approach could be nice as an administration to try, because what I think we should come at or achieve in the long term is something. So we all know about these private-public partnerships. Everybody has an understanding what that is, and let's try to come up with public-community partnerships in the future. Think conceptually about ongoing cooperation, not just 2 hack days a year when we publish new data, but an ongoing. So civic monitoring will be coming in, and think of data cycles.
Thanks. That's perfect. I think that's a good short conclusion for our interesting session. I hope you have found also some solutions to challenges from your side. As a last note, we have from Anahi, from Anahi and from Irina also 2 sheets of notes basically, and also from Luigi, which you can take here, some copies. We have more panels and more sessions coming up. This one was about the challenges. I hope in the next ones you find the solutions to the challenges, and other than that, I'm very happy for this interesting discussion. Thank you to you all, and really enjoy these days at Open Knowledge Conference in Geneva. Thanks.